Hello, Mr. Andrew Chamberlain. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you? I,
I'm
I,
very well.
are you still an award-winning podcaster this week?
Always, from now and forever.
Forevermore.
Yes, Elisa Pratt, Brewer Pratt Solutions, award-winning podcaster, award-winning author. Yes, I wear that badge now permanently and with pride.
I like
And I
that.
welcome you to the newest episode of Association Transformation,
Thank you very
the
much.
award-winning podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here. And what a pleasure it is. And actually, today I'm going to kind of I know you all we always have our little banter where you abuse me for a few minutes and then we move on.
Hold on, let me get my violin for you.
But I'm going to take a bit of a lead here in terms of sort of introducing this subject, because actually this is one that you've brought to the table.
Thank you.
You've said to me, actually, I want to talk about this, and I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, I like this. You came to me with continuous disruptive innovation, which I love, and I've never heard of it, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is exciting. This is something new. I love exciting and new stuff. And you came to me and you said, right, okay, there's this concept that's out there, continuous disruptive innovation. I want to talk about it in the new, in terms of the non-profit space. I want us to take it apart, understand it, and sort of demonstrate to our listeners, both of them, how we understand this concept and how it can apply to the non-profit world. And so I did a little bit of research myself, because
Oh,
it's only
look at
fair and
you.
proper. It's only fair and proper if I'm, being asked to discuss something, I should know something about it. And so, there's this article that you bounced across to me, which I love. And then I was reading it again, and I thought, this article was published 12 years ago.
Right. This is not a new concept, which I think makes it even that much more legitimate.
Yeah.
It was originally conceived of during the competitive for-profit technology boom. Well, post I don't know, what are we calling that? Post recession.
Yeah,
But
because it
yeah,
was
in
on the back
2000,
of 2008, and this was,
yeah.
yeah.
But in 2010, we had corporate examples that had played themselves out and could therefore then be studied. And you had two different paths. One was a blockbuster type path, and one that was more of an Apple or Google type path. Different types of companies, for-profit companies that approached disruption differently. And as I read this article, and you did inspire me when we chatted about attention economics. I was inspired to go and learn more about different concepts that could be brought into the nonprofit space, and that we as associations and charities and nonprofits could learn from. And for me, continuous disruptive innovation is an opportunity to approach investment and risk and experimentation aggressively, with a mind and an awareness of our competition. As I work with organizations, and you say, okay, what's your space look like? What's your environment? What's that environmental scan look like? And rarely do people talk about what their competitors are doing. In the nonprofit space, you absolutely have competitors. You have competitors for your members' time, competitors for your members' money, competitors for your donors' interest and investment. And I think that's undervalued, underrepresented, underconsidered. And go ahead.
Well, I think also, now, and we've mentioned this before, in terms of competition is global now. Competition is global. So we have our sister associations around the world who are potential, either hopefully one would hope collaborators, but equally competitors. So I think I'm loving what you're saying about, opening our eyes to the fact that actually, we have to be competitive for our members' money, as well as our members' commitment. So talk to me, tell me what is continuous disruptive innovation. How do I understand it?
All right. So I'm an early student to this. So I encourage anyone who's listening who knows more about this than we do to,
switch off,
message
now.
us, chime in, tweet us immediately about where we're going wrong with this. But as I understand it, this continuous disruptive innovation is about driving sustained value creation. Originally those who would disruption was considered a product or a technology, something that changed or turned an industry on its ear. And then those that had that disruptive service or program or technology, they shifted into a defensive mode. They wanted to protect themselves, build walls around that, and protect the market and the audience that they had then acquired.
Okay.
Instead, through continuous disruptive innovation, which is not as common, the author here, Mr. Chris Catapano of Bridge Sphere, and I've messaged him. I've invited him to come on a future podcast.
Oh, you're good.
He says this is a rare occurrence, but continuous disruptive innovation is about a management team who's willing to think outside of the box, acknowledging the competitive landscape, not being naive or sticking your head in the sand as it relates to your competitors, but who are willing to push through competitive threats and invest in research and development. And that's a very for-profit, corporate term. But when I think of associations, not just what are you doing now? How are you keeping your members served? How are you delivering on your mission now? But what is the future? What is the disruption that you are going to bring to the table? What is the product, service, or technology that you are going to deliver to your membership that will result in a value creation that is ongoing?
It's an uncomfortable space, though, isn't it? It's an uncomfortable space. Of course,
it's scary as hell.
And and do you not feel a wee bit like we've all had enough of disruption?
But this is where I like going back to the 2010 definition of disruption. We've now come to understand disruption as geopolitical shifts and socioeconomic change and cultural transitions and generational shifts and global pandemics. I want to go back to the good old days where a disruption was a new product or a new service or a new approach to your business that changed everything. I think that's a lot safer and easier to wrap your mind around than all of the shifts in the world that are out of our control.
Yeah, no, I get that. I do. No, I absolutely. What I think is interesting is really what is interesting, as I said earlier, when I've been doing my research on this, and I did do some research, is actually there's not a lot really been written about it in the 10 years since this article.
There hasn't, which is why I brought it to you, because I wanted to see if you could find anything else, if we could tease this out. And again, I've invited Chris with Bridge Sphere to join us in our next iteration of this conversation, because I want to hear how it's been pursued. You do hear a lot about innovation, you hear a lot about disruption, but they're not paired. They're not the yin and yang that this approach considers them to be. That disruption is your opportunity for innovation. And if you aren't driving it, then you are the one being a victim of it.
Yeah, because
as your competitors push it through.
Yes, because effectively what we're talking about is disruption as the core component of your business model. We're always at the forefront. We're not just early adopters. We're not early adopters. We're actually the entity or the group at the front of what's the word, at the head of the arrow, if you like. We're actually constantly changing and evolving, updating and modifying and modernizing our service or our product to keep up with, or to lead changes that are going on socioeconomically, etc., technologically, etc. But again, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking a non-profit. Well, let me rephrase this. The examples that this guy quotes, which back in 2010 were the obvious examples, which were Apple and Google. Interestingly, I would argue in 2022, I don't see Apple and Google as the disruptors anymore. I think there are others now who are disruptive, right. And actually Google and Apple are quite commonplace. Likewise,
which is interesting, and that's what they predict in this article, is that once you are an original disruptor, you will then shift to a strategy of defense, of protecting protecting what you've acquired,
built.
protecting what you've developed,
Mhm.
and trying to ensure that your days in the sun, as he says, are as long as possible. But you no longer, you can't innovate and protect at the same time. And go ahead.
Can it be cyclical? Can you be can you engage, for X number of months or years, be the market leader, as it were, be the global benchmark for continuous disruption, then go into a phase of what was the phrase? Sorry, the phrase of defense. What are you calling it? Defensive?
Well, he calls it disrupt, then defend.
No, disruptive. Can you go into that cycle, but then come back out of that and go back into the wanting to be the market leader, wanting to be the benchmark?
Well, it has to. I mean, your disruptions will expire, right? Your disruptions will become commonplace. And we've seen that over the last 24 months, where going virtual, webinars, Zooming, hybrid meetings, all of that used to be a disruption. That used to be an innovation. It's now becoming commonplace. There will have to be the next. There will have to be the next push forward. And my question to associations and nonprofits is, are you brave enough to invest in those questions and to try and experiment and invest in those opportunities and solutions? Or are you just going to wait until your competitors figure it out and then ride their coattails and try to come up with something as good?
Yeah, or play catch up, and
play catch up. Of course, play catch up.
Yeah, and lose out on a big chunk of your opportunity. So, what does this? I'm just trying to wrap my head around this in terms of So I'm an association exec listening to this now. I'm thinking, yeah, okay, I get what these guys are talking about for a change. I understand. They're making sense for a change. These two. What in practice does this look like? What in practical terms, from an association or a nonprofit perspective, does this look like? And I don't mean to identify, what are the specifics of, what does an innovative service or product look like? What does the cycle look like? What does the culture look like? What do we need to have in place for an organization to feel comfortable, or uncomfortable indeed, but willing to be the disruptor, to be the innovative disruptor?
For me, and I'm someone who works a lot in the strategic planning space, which is managing foresight with, practical understanding of capacity and potential and serving your mission. I think this is bigger than that. This is the universe in which strategic planning is a planet. And continuous disruptive innovation, to me, is about listening differently, asking different questions, and investing in different ways. Not just about plugging in that new or next technology and being proud of yourselves for having a fresh website or a new LMS. This is about thinking beyond that. To me, this is the truly exciting and scary brainstorming that an organization gets to do about how it is not going to just build upon the past, but truly change the future. And those are scary questions. Those are answers that may not even come in our lifetime. But how can an association start down those paths and plant the seeds and lay the groundwork for those disruptions, those services, those technologies, those changes that really shift and evolve that profession or that industry or that membership?
No, I'm with you. It's interesting. Earlier on, you pointed to, you said, you mentioned risk. And
that's the catch, I hear.
Well, and it's interesting. It's funny because earlier, before I came on and we started recording, I was actually writing up I was writing up an article around risk and a willingness to embrace risk and how we understand our collective appetites. And for me, and you know I love risk. I'm just like, yeah, whatever. Let's just do it. No, let's just do it. If it works, brilliant. If it doesn't, we'll just move on to the next thing. And I'm always willing to fail, and I'm always willing to learn from that. And I'm happy to fail quickly and to fail badly, and then just move on and learn from it. I suppose actually what we're pointing to here is not just this. It's not just systems and processes and protocol in place. We actually need a whole culture around this, don't we? This is this is an inherently cultural piece that we're talking, isn't it? And
this is a go ahead.
Go on. No, go on.
This is about having the right staff who understand the landscape and are empowered to, it's as cheesy as it sounds, to think outside the box.
Well, also they need to be empowered to fail. And I think
absolutely.
Too often,
and that's that cultural piece you're talking about. And now is the scariest time. I know organizations that are patting themselves on the back for having just survived the last 24 months. And they're so happy they've made it. But now is when you have the potentially greatest risk, but greatest opportunity to be propelled forward by taking a new risk.
Well, I would say now is when you've probably got the greatest appetite as well, because obviously, if boards have, collectively as teams come through the last 2 years, seen that they've survived, seen that their executives have, been adaptable, flexible, people have been able to move quickly. Why are you laughing?
Well, I laugh because you're assuming organizational agility. You're making some assumptions that aren't always the case in a lot of organizations. Not everyone's made it through these last 24 months at all, and definitely not at the same level of success and achievement.
Okay. But those guys are on a different trajectory and probably
they're not ready for this. They're not ready for this at all.
No. So within the context of wanting to adopt a culture of continuous disruptive innovation,
yes, you first have to allow failure. You have to allow voice, people to have ideas.
Yeah.
You have to have some resources. You can't have zero money in the bank if you want to invest in the exploration of new value propositions, of alternative delivery models, of new environments and platforms. So there are definitely ingredients that you have to have before you can begin this recipe.
I love this. As we're talking, I'm writing down. I think there's a whole piece here. I think we're actually going to author something. What do you think? I think there's a.
Well, I think we need to do some more research, and
we've done enough research. We've done enough. It's fine. It's okay. We've done our research. We've got this one 2,000 word article. Is it even that? Maybe 1,500 word article. Boom, research done. Now we're authoritative in our understanding and appreciation of it.
But, we have colleagues in the association space who champion things like grand challenges and foresight. And visionary long-term planning, and all those things sound great, but I gravitated to this because it had a corporate foundation. It had a for-profit history, and I like those things because I like the level of speed and aggression that for-profit organizations can move with. I think it's important to always recognize competitors, and I find associations less than willing to explore those challenges or potential partnerships.
You know that I'm going to be the contentious one, because I always am. I think a lot of nonprofits are apathetic to it. I think they have a long history. I think they have a long tenure in the space in which they occupy, and I think they're slow to recognize and respond to the realities of the markets in which, in fact, they don't even use the language of markets.
No, and they're trapped. They're trying to serve their what I call legacy membership.
Yes.
Those past chairs and those 10-year members and 20-year members who want things the way they have been.
Yes.
And they're trying to serve their current young and maybe early and mid-career members. And then they're trying to appeal to and have some relevance with a future membership. I mean, they're trapped going in every direction, serving so many masters that they have become completely impotent.
Yes.
And it's sad. It's sad seeing them all chase their tails. And to me, this is a very scary management style. It's not appropriate for every organization. But, I would ask an executive and a board, are you going to change this space? Are you going to be, the Apple or the Google of your industry, your profession, your specialty, your niche? And if you're just going along to host an annual meeting and print a magazine and stick to the status quo, then I think your years are numbered.
Yeah. You should start planning now for the end, as it were. It might be
so dramatic.
Well, it might be a
Plan
slow
for the
demise,
end.
but the reality is, I think we're no longer working in any environment, market environment, that any of us have worked in before. We've had this unprecedented period of stability, the last 50, 60, 70 years. That has, and technology, since this article was written 10 years ago, is demonstrating, and every day there's something new now. Technology is demanding of us to work in completely different ways, in completely different markets, with completely different forecasts that it hasn't done in the past. The last 20 years have just seen us accelerate constantly in a technological context that we can't ignore or pretend that isn't happening. And last 2 years have demonstrated that it's impossible to ignore the technological benefits as well as challenges of the markets in which we work now. So, tell me and I know that you always, when you go in with a board and with an executive team, I know you always challenge them to be creative and to be brave and courageous and to think broader than they perhaps have been. Are you going to now be using the language of continuous disruptive innovation? Is that where you're going to be focusing and challenging your teams when you walk in that room?
I think to your earlier point, it's about knowing their appetite, knowing where they are on the spectrum of innovation and disruption, because not every group is ready for it. But those groups that are, yes, I think there's some different and challenging questions to be asked. It's about looking beyond just surviving this year or adapting to and catching up with the changes that are already in place. I want to know about their drivers of change and what the members of the future expect. And I want to envision not just to serve, but envision to create the future that they think their members will most benefit from. So there's more research to be done. I know you won't do any more homework, but I'll do some more homework on this. You go focus on some attention economics. I'm going to look into continuous disruptive innovation because I think both have applications for the nonprofit and association spaces. I think this is some of the terminology, both from science and from the corporate world, that we can adapt. And there's opportunities here.
And I want to just link it always back to that piece we did last year about futures literacy as well.
Absolutely.
All of this is entwined, and so I'm always going to want to bring it back to that as well. But that's my final point. Thank you, by the way. Well, thank you for bringing the continuous disruptive innovation.
You're welcome.
Because I love it.
No, and thank you to our listeners. If you do have any ideas or thoughts on continuous disruptive innovation or other topics that you'd like us to explore that you think would have value in the association space, we encourage you to email us at hello@yourconsort.com. You can also find Association Transformation anywhere you get your podcasts. Make us one of your favorites. And until next time, we ask you to put your members and your mission first.